I wanted to, as I said before we jumped on, we had a little bit of a chat, but I know there are the dozens and dozens of videos and interviews that you've done over the past few years in and around very similar topics. I wanted to try and take a different approach on for the rest of this call, if we could, Kyle, and maybe get your thoughts around, maybe when you first got started in SEO, how you, in your words, went from it being a hobby to a business, how you got clients and all of that stuff early on in your journey. Because I know people within my group, Bring the SEO, most of them are at that stage. There are a few in there that run agencies and others that are more established, but for the vast majority of them, they're at that early stage of, perhaps niching down, trying to get their first client, figuring, and finding their way. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, Kyle.
Sure. Looking kind of back at what we did, and I was very fortunate to have a business partner that was focused on the business side of things, in creating business processes and making sure that we had things set up properly. That's invaluable to get things started correctly at the beginning. I mean, the first thing a lot of people want to do is they get that first client and they want to take that check and put it into their personal checking account. And that's a mistake. Like, you've already made a pretty big mistake. You need to put it into a business account. You can bill, you can pay yourself out of that, but you want to immediately start to just really take care of those small details. Think of it as you're running a business, and if you think about it as you're running a business, you will start running a business. Now, at the beginning, it is a well-paying hobby, right? It's not paying all the bills. It might be a poorly paying hobby, but the idea is that you should treat it like a business from the start. It'll help you make better decisions, and you'll be in a much better position to grow. And when you end up with actual business problems, you've got a lot more protection as well. A real big milestone for me was when we could pay ourselves a salary, so that it didn't matter if we gained a client or lost a client. The salary remained the same. That was a really big milestone. Another big milestone has been not knowing all my clients. That's when I realized that we actually have a bit of a company here, because we have clients coming in that I didn't touch and I'm not communicating with. That's how you can see that you actually then have a business, because one thing that agencies have a problem with is selling the business. And the reason it's difficult to sell the business is because you are the business. If you're not in it, it's not, it has no value. You're the one that's bringing in all the clients. You're the one that's servicing the clients. You're the one that's overseeing the implementation. That is a professional service, but it's not necessarily a business that can be sold. So another milestone would be to have things in place where it is run like a business and you could leave and it would still be okay. So that's like another milestone to think about.
Are you talking about selling the business on an exit, or are you talking about the business running independent of your involvement?
The business running independent of your involvement. Right. If you can get to that point, then you actually have a business that can be sold, and then you actually have an SEO business. That is something that is an actual asset at that point. And those are kind of like the stages of hobby to business. And you might not get all the way there. I mean, that doesn't invalidate the work. But if you want to get to that point, if that's actually what your goal is, I would love to have an exit. I would like to get out of this, or I'd like to have it run on its own. That's what you have to aim for them. But you have to do those things at the beginning, those small things that set up the business correctly to be able to get to that point. And there are obviously little milestones along the way. But those are some big ones in my mind, where being able to pay myself a salary, so client acquisition or loss didn't impact my bottom line, my personal bottom line, not having having clients that I've never met, and then the business can run itself. Those are kind of three massive milestones, and with little things in between, where looking back in my own journey.
Something that you started with there, which I think is really important, and this might be true for a lot of freelancers in particular. There's a real difference in, just correct me if you, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, but there's a real difference between knowing how to do SEO and running an SEO business. These are two completely different things. Because I know when I started providing client services, offering SEO, at the time I was doing web design, it was just a natural transition over. I was pretty confident doing SEO, but I had fucking no idea what I was doing in terms of charging, the bookkeeping, accounting, campaign management, hiring stuff. I had no idea about any of that. So I'd love to get your thoughts around the importance of that, because that's essentially what I'm sharing with my members. That knowing how to do SEO is one thing, but having the business processes and systems in place, man, that's something else.
Oh, entirely. And that takes years, and we're still refining. One thing that we've got now in our agency is that we have a leadership team. And the leadership team does not include myself or my business partner. So these are people that have come up through the company, and they're now in positions of authority where they can make decisions. And the idea is that the leadership team, we talk about, and we have our big meeting, this is the direction we want to go, or this is what we're trying to do. But then the leadership team is empowered to make those decisions, how to make that happen. And then it just kind of comes back with like, here, this is the plan, just for like a final, yeah, that looks good. So having people that can be decision makers and they can take ownership of something is big towards to kind of move forward or to progress. But it starts off with, I think, something a little bit smaller than that. As you grow out from a freelancer, you're basically taking hats off and you're giving it to somebody for them to do that particular task. If you train them up and you give them a point that they're responsible for that information or for that thing, they'll end up doing it better than you did because they're completely focused on it. So you have to obviously train them to do it how you want it done. You do some oversight, but at some point you do have to let them go and do it and have so that they have ownership of the particular thing. They'll end up excelling. And I think if you kind of follow that model, then you can grow it out to that's how it continues to happen. You take a hat off, you give that responsibility to somebody else, give them ownership of it, and then they can take it and grow, and they can do better than you were doing on that particular thing. So that's how I would kind of look to scale to the point that you could have, I think what we have now is that leadership team where it's people, not myself, that are making agency level decisions. Obviously I do have to approve things at the end of the day, but that they can say like, hey, this was our problem. This is where we need to get, here's what we worked out. And they have ownership of it. They feel that this is their thing to do. And it is their responsibility within this company.
So Carl, excuse me, maybe just give some idea of the size of your company now. And as opposed to when you first got started, were you just working as a soloist, as a freelancer on your own from home in the basement, so to speak, and then you partnered up with someone? I mean,
yeah.
Walk me through that so I can get a better understanding.
Sure. Where I started is I started doing web design and development. I started a company in Korea, pretty natural thing. And part of the company was building a website, and it was a very technical website. And I ended up getting together a pretty decent sized team. And I got the idea. I was like, I could probably general contract these now because these guys are pretty tight.
So you started in web design.
Income, got in. That's right. And that was just based on, that I built a very complex site, and I had to go through 40 developers to finally find the crew that could do it. And once they could do it, I was like, well, I could probably then build other websites. So then I transitioned in from there because I wanted the recurring income. I was like, these people like these websites. They like what's going on. Let's do SEO. I just heard about it's a thing where we can then get a monthly recurring income after the site is built. And that was kind of what progressed. And then there were lots of twists and turns, but that turned into my main focus at that point. And then I was actually hired by my now business partner for a project. And then that turned into a second project and a third. And then we decided, hey, let's just form an agency out of this and go for it. So we worked together for about a year and a half before we even met, but started this agency, and then started with 2. We now have, I think we have 16 people working for us.
Right, okay. And that's globally, right? Because you've got virtual assistants and staff elsewhere.
That's right. Most people, like our biggest cluster is in Berlin of people that come to like a particular place to work.
Right.
About half of our staff does that, and about half are remote. throughout different places.
And so how many, if you can share, how many clients would you have at the moment? And
I honestly have no idea. I was
yeah, you're really insulated from all that noise, don't you?
what's funny is that yeah, because I knew we were going to talk about some agency things, and I meant to look it up, and I was like, I hope he doesn't ask.
That's okay.
I mean,
Would
I
it
look
be in
like
the
a prick.
hundreds, or would it be?
No, no, no. So what we've done in the last 2 years, which has been interesting, is that our number of clients has gone down, but our revenue has gone up.
Right.
And that's a conscious choice, because you could get 200, $300 clients,
Yeah.
but you could never service that.
Yeah,
So
you won't get much sleep.
no, none whatsoever. And one other thing too, that it's an interesting thing on growth, is that you do need to be able to service the growth. So it's one thing to go out and get 10 clients. It's quite another thing to service 10 clients. And so one thing that we've also tried to do is that as we expand, that we do have the team to do it. That has been a big part of
Right.
our focus. So trying to get clients at a certain monthly value, but then also having the staff in place, and staff is expensive. That's not a cheap thing to do. Just landing a particular client it's a certain sum per month doesn't necessarily mean you've crushed it, because of the cost it takes to maintain.
Yeah, it's not linear. Your expenses and overheads and everything
and
go up
also
with the number of clients that your revenue goes up, but your expenses follow very closely behind.
Exactly. It's not like a SaaS business where onboarding after the first one is a nominal cost. You basically have the exact same cost on every client, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some things you can do in bulk, but it's not the same kind of scale where it costs this much to get one, and then it's only like that much more for two. It's almost the same amount for the next client.
And did you, when you first got started, this is something that I struggled with for probably at least 12 months, and it's something that I've spoken with a number of the guys out of the group. Did you know at the very beginning of your journey, Kyle, whether you wanted to just work as an SEO consultant or contractor, or if you wanted to grow and build a huge agency? Did you know, or have you just sort of gone along with the journey as it's sort of evolved?
Well, I mean, I knew I wanted to make more money, and figuring out how to do that has probably driven a lot of decisions on how can we maximize this. How can we leverage what we put in to get more out. It's been a big driver of decision. I mean, obviously, money's not the only driver, but that's what's kind of caused maybe our growth, is knowing, hey, we're here, but we could get to there.
Yeah, for me, I made this because I worked in government for about 9 years, and I made the decision after I got out of that, I just had enough of that whole corporate lifestyle. I've got friends that run a large-scale agency in Sydney that are probably doing in excess of $10 million a year, perhaps more. But there's a cost involved with that. And I speak with a lot of freelancers and consultants, SEO consultants, that say, I want to make $100,000 a month, or I want to make 50,000. And my advice is always think about your end point and work backwards. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you won't know until you're there. But I think for me, at least, I made the decision that I'm comfortable working from home. I've got 4 virtual assistants. If I can do $500,000 a year doing that, then I can go and sit down at the cafe by the water every Friday, then I'm okay with that. But I guess everyone has their own
journey. Some
journey.
numbers real quick. For sure, but yeah, for sure. But if you think about, okay, let's say you bring in a $2,000 a month client. You have to assume about 1,000 of that is going to cost. That's going to be distributed between the people doing the implementation for you. That's going to be content creation. That's going to be software cost. You want to run Slack for your company. There's a cost there, and those types of things. So you got to figure all in cost is about 50%. And then as a rough number, the government's going to take somewhere between 20 and 30% from there. So now you can see how much you are left with in terms of margin that could go into your pocket. But then if you have, a business partner, then that's cut in half right there. And if you have, you probably need to put money away for the company because you should have cash reserves. So then that's going to be a percentage. And then you've got probably your own marketing costs for the company and other companies that actually
Yeah.
aren't directly coming out of that, but also need to come out of that portion. So
Yeah.
there's another little chunk. And you can see how that $2,000 client, like, oh my God, I'm making $2,000, is instantly not a lot going into your pocket, like
No.
very little. There's a
Yeah.
very little sliver that's left. So when you think about it, you could then start to work those numbers and figure out how much you get out of each client. So then you know what you can scale towards to hit those, say, monthly goals on what you want to make.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In the process of putting together a calculator that allows you to enter in your data, your objectives, monthly goals, how many calls, your conversion rates, what a lead's worth, and yeah, it really puts it into perspective because I mean it's easy, isn't it, to say I want to make $10,000 a month, and then you crunch some numbers and well, you need to sit down and speak to 300 people every month. Holy fuck, that's
Yeah. No,
yeah,
exactly right. And then you
yeah,
decide, like, okay, so I'm going to outsource that. I'm going to bring in a sales team. That's great. But then now you're paying that sales team, and you're
yeah,
probably paying them whether they close or not. Like,
yeah,
there's probably some sort of balance there where you're paying them a little bit and they're paying a commission. So then you're paying them, that's coming out of a bottom line. And then if they close that $2,000 client, they're getting a little sliver off the top. So that 2,000 that they went and got for you because they needed to talk to those 300 people to make a certain number of conversions,
yeah.
to keep things in the pipeline. You can see how, like, at
Mm,
scale, and scale is great, and that's how you do grow, but it doesn't necessarily mean you get more out of it.
yeah.
Each client is only really giving you that much, regardless of how you figure out how to scale it.
Kyle, I'd be interested in getting your thoughts around niching down. This is a discussion that's been happening a lot in the group. I like the idea. I'm in favor of it, but I'd certainly like to get your thoughts on becoming a specialist and niching down in a particular industry.
So what, niches make reaches, right? Um, uh, and I think that as a pithy general statement, I think that's true. The problem you run into is nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects COVID, where you've got a niche that is crushing it, and it turns out nobody can go and spend their money there. Um, so I do think you need a form of diversification in your portfolio, in your client portfolio. I think there's nothing wrong with having um, a good chunk coming from a certain type of client, but spreading the risk is a good idea. And there are different types of risk factors. The client that's paying you, $500 a month is easier to acquire. They've got a shorter cycle from when they first contact you to when they sign, but they also have a higher churn rate. And they are also more susceptible to changes in the economy. And and not even like mass changes in the economy, even local changes in the economy affect them more. Versus a higher ticket client, a $4,000 a month kind of client, that's going to be a longer sales cycle, but that client also probably has a marketing budget that they've already factored for, so that when you sign them, that they'll be with you for at least 6 months, if not a year, because they've actually already budgeted out that money. But you can't just say I'm going to do one or the other, or I'm only going to focus on this, because there are times when you're landing these clients and there are times when you're landing those clients. So, and you can see the risk associated with both of those things. And those are two very general categories, but I think you do need to balance between these sorts of factors. You also have location factors. We quite very luckily are in 3 different markets. We're in US and Canada, we're in Europe, and we're in Australia. And so not all economies do well at the same time. There's often where some economies are doing better than others, and we've been able to diversify that risk. There are times when we pick up 0 Australian clients for a couple months,
Right.
or 0 European, or 0 from North America. But because we've got those other streams and those other economies are doing fine, or we can pick up clients there, that also then diversifies risk. So or to answer your question, I agree that you can make more by niching down. I do think you need to be mindful of diversification of your client portfolio to balance the risk involved in doing that.
No, they're all great points. Certainly agree. There have been arguments for and against. I'm not sure. I spoke with Jason Hennessy recently, who's as you probably know, has niched down in the legal space and done very well. That, you know, there'll be industries that are immune to certain external influences. I mean, with COVID, I mean, that's a global pandemic that no one expected, and it's probably, you know, it's been 100 years since that happened. So it certainly, you know, there would have been industries that got absolutely wiped out. You know, tourism, hospitality, those industries got absolutely slammed.
But who would have ever thought that if I niche down into dentists, that I would get skinned?
Yeah,
You know, like everyone needs a dentist. You have to
yeah,
go to the dentist, and it turns
yeah,
out you don't. You know, like this happens,
yeah,
and your very stable niche that is impervious to all things because everybody has to
yeah.
go to the dentist. All of a sudden, nobody can go to the dentist.
Yeah, I think what you said there and about diversifying risk and also globalizing your offering can certainly make a difference. I think even for myself, like I'm currently servicing the Australian market, but if I, well, I shouldn't say if, but once I go all in and niche down, because I'm definitely going to go in that direction, I'm going to service a global audience. And so for me, and this is a question I get asked, I mean, oh, you know, you're going to be competing with yourself. What about exclusivity and all of these other things? Like for me, I only need, you know, 10 to 15, maybe 20 clients pay me 3.5, 4, 5 grand a month, and I'm good. That's all I want. I don't want hundreds of clients. So having that overlap is probably not going to be an issue. Yeah, diversifying the risk that's an interesting point. And I know that when COVID hit here, my service-based business, my SEO business itself, stopped. Everything ground to a halt because my clients said, look, we can't leave the house. We can't service our clients.
Right.
We're stuck at home. And I was like, okay, well, fuck, I'll pause everyone's campaigns, which I did. And then I was sitting around thinking, what the fuck do I do now? Just as I'm
Right.
sure a lot of other people were. But it was interesting to note that my training was still churning along. I was still getting people signing up for the training and doing my training and my course and everything else. So, and that wasn't something that I consciously really thought through. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm still making money through my training, even though my service-based business has stopped. So thankfully, I had that level of, you know, redundancy, and I had that bit of diversity in place. And I think for people that, excuse me, I'm just getting over the last bit of a cold, but I think for people that are niching down, that are concerned about not having, you know, not having that immunity there to risk, they don't need to limit themselves to the done for you model. I think, you know, with me, I like the do it yourself and the done with you. Like I was still doing some consulting and the do it yourself with the training. That stuff was still chugging along. So, you know, maybe you could still be servicing dentists and providing the done for you stuff. But at the same time, you could have, you know, here's a fucking sales course or something for dentists to help them on board and with their retention rates. And this is something that, you know, it's going to chug along regardless of whether or not they're, you know, in lockdown or something else, something along those lines. Yeah.
For sure. You have to assume they will come back at some point. And something you can give them to purchase in the meantime that maybe isn't as high a ticket a product as your service offering is always a great thing to do. And often those things even lead to sales anyway. If you teach people how to do it, they realize how hard it is,
Yeah.
and they'll pay you to do it. And now they understand it a little bit better on what you're trying to do for them.
I wanted to ask sticking points. Sticking points when you were growing. Maybe give me 2 or 3 sticking points and how you solved them. Kyle, I know getting clients might be one, you know, dealing with difficult clients might be another, what you're charging, and maybe 2 or 3 sticking points that you experienced as you were putting your SEO agency together and how you solved them.
One of the best things we did was figuring out how much everything cost. You know, every activity that we're going to do, how much does it cost to the penny? And that's, you know, because you've got a piece of software involved, perhaps. This person needs to look at it. This person needs to do it. Like, you know, just writing a piece of content. Okay, so somebody puts the order in. How much time did that take? How much are we paying them for that? Somebody creates the content. How much are we paying for that? You know, then we run it through this tool or that tool. How much can we then divide out what the cost is for the tool to do that particular thing? And then getting that fixed cost but then putting an expertise cost on top of it. Okay, we're paying this person $20 an hour, but they have actual knowledge that isn't widely known. What would be the retail price on that? And then putting that cost in. So the idea is that, while we're paying them 20, it's really worth 40. And then you can figure out your difference between actual cost and what a retail cost is. And then you can see what your margins really are going to be per activity. From there, what we realized in order to do that is that we had to put everything down as a task. First you do this, then you do that, then you do that, which is a problem in the SEO industry where a lot of people are like, oh, just build a backlink. How do you build a backlink? But everyone just says, yeah, build backlinks. Well, how do you even do that? Well, there are, but so you have to have each step done, and so that you can know how to do that, and you know how much it actually costs. Those are really big steps for us so everything is lined out exactly, and then everything is costed out exactly. We then did a form of gamification with our budgets. So let's say a client is at $2,000 a month. We call that 200 points. We have a point value system for every activity that we would do for a client. So then we have a meeting at the beginning of the month with the client, and they say, okay, our goals are to get from here to there. We see, okay, this is how we would do it. And these are now the activities involved in doing that. And these are all the point values for each of those things to satisfy those 200 points that they have available for the month. So then throughout the month, all we do is we tell them this is what we're doing. At the end of the month, we showed them what we did. The client never has to guess as to what we are actually doing because we pointed everything out by activity at the beginning. Right. So we're completely transparent with the clients about what we're doing.
Yeah,
they can see where their money is being spent. And then at the end, they see the result.
Yeah, that's something that not enough SEO consultants are doing. It's something that I teach heavily. I talk about it a lot in the training, providing clients with work summary sheets that outlines all of the work that has been performed for that month. So they know that the work's actually being done. They know where their money's being spent. They know they're not, they're getting a value for money. There's too many people that just, automated report full of bar charts and squiggly lines, and the client's sitting there thinking, what the fuck does this actually mean?
No, exactly. We're not perfect at this, and we do get it from time to time, but I tell the account managers the one thing we can't get from the client is the email that says, what's going on with my campaign? Or I don't know what we're doing. Yeah. And we're not 100%. We get that from time to time. And then somebody gets a stern talking to, but the client should never actually worry about that because we should have had that conversation at the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
The point value should be there. They should be getting updates as things are going throughout the month. And then in the final week of the month, they should be getting the information that says, this is what we did.
Yeah.
They should always know what's going on.
Yeah. And that's not to say you need to be speaking with the client every 5 minutes, right? I do end of month strategy sessions where it's, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, jump on, have a chat like this, go through the reports, bring them up to speed, all fine and dandy. I'll see you next month.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't have to be on the phone with them, but there should be some form of communication where they can be reassured that they know things are being done.
Yeah.
And so you should have like an internal clock going like, you know what? We are working on this. We are getting it done, but we haven't actually said anything to them in 5 days.
Yeah.
A little ping is a good idea.
Yeah. No, I love the cut of your jib. Everything that you're saying is resonating because I'm the same. I might be sitting here working, haven't spoken to Sean in a while. Just going to send him a quick email, let him know what's going on, because that clients can get twitchy, and that little itch can turn into a rash if you don't get on top of it quick enough.
And so then they're going to look for somebody else to do the work, even though you're crushing it.
It's a huge fear. It's a pain point for a lot of business owners that, call me and say, never heard from them. Don't know what the fuck they were doing. We don't even know if it worked. We just feel like we just threw money at them, and for what?
Right.
Any other
need to see where the money's going.
Yeah. Any other sticking points, Kyle, you can think of? What about staffing?
Oh, staffing is a pain in the ass, right? So what I would recommend doing is, so obviously I've got a lot of videos out there, right? Um, I'm not a difficult person to find. Also, the things I talk about are the ethos of our company, the backbone of what we do. You know, what I talk about online, that's actually what we implement. There's no hiding the ball here. What I teach is what we do in the agency. So if somebody's coming in to apply for a job, they should have seen a video of mine.
Right.
You know, they should be able to talk about that because I am that easy to find. My
Well,
information is out there. Not that I need
what's
a fanboy.
what's it?
You know, I don't need somebody. I don't need a
What's that? What's that tagline on the bottom of your website? So I'm kind of a big deal. Oh no, that's the other guy.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm a big deal. I don't need somebody to tell me how great I am, but I do need, they should have done some research, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
we found that the people that and I'm not involved in hiring anymore because I think I've hired too many bad people. But the leadership team was like, Kyle, your ideas are great, but we're going to handle it from here.
Right.
And that's why it's a good idea to have that leadership team. But it's a question that gets asked, people that do apply when we do post for positions. You know, what do you think of Kyle's most recent talk, or what was the most recent talk you saw? And they should have a pretty good answer to that. Now, let's say you don't have all the talks, you know, that I've done, and you don't have all the web stuff. It's probably pretty easy to rank for your name, especially your name in SEO. Get a video up there and then ask them. You know, if they're an online person and they're looking to work for an online agency, and one of the biggest things that we have to do is research and find answers, they probably should have done John Romaine SEO real quick, and they can see a most recent video. And if you're not John Romaine, you know, or you're not, you know, somebody that has those types of videos up all the time that can be found, you could put up one or two and they should be able to find it, and they should be able to discuss it with you. And I think that'd be a good way to filter out people that are serious about what they're doing. And then also see how they're aligned with what you're talking about. Like, what'd you think about when I said we should never do blah, blah, blah,
Right.
or that we should do this, that, or the other. And if you get any flack, then, you know, if they disagree, then, you know, they're not going to follow what you want them to do.
Okay. All right. Just a couple of points and we'll wrap it up, Kyle, because I know we've been here for an hour now. Three tips for getting clients for people that are early on in their journey. What would be 3 tips that you would recommend in terms of getting your first clients?
Well, you have to have multiple ways to get clients. There are plenty of good ways to do it, and there are plenty of courses that you can buy, and all you need to understand is there isn't just one stream to get clients. You do have to think of it in multiple streams. You know, I'm going to do this type of outreach, I'm going to do this type of activity, I'm going to do that. Those things all need to work in tandem. Like, they have to be going at the same time, because you'll find one will work and one won't. And then one will work like gangbusters for some reason, and the other one dropped off. So you have to have those multiple streams to gain clients, whichever ones you're most comfortable with. The other thing that I would do is, at the beginning, you need to get the client on board with your KPIs. How are you going to report success? That's a huge point, because if you can't report success or properly frame failure, you will lose them in month 2. So you want clients that are on board with your ideas, and that happens in your proposal. You know, when you're giving them the proposal, like, I would like you as my client, you need to be using the language that you're going to be using to measure success, and give them examples of that. If they are not on board with those concepts, that's not a good client. You're going to have friction. Even if they decide to go with you, it's going to be a lousy client. So you want your clients to be thinking the same way you are. You can educate them on that to think the correct way, but that starts at the proposal. Don't hide anything. Don't, like, you know, we're gonna get you ranking, and it turns out we don't actually report on keywords, which is a fine thing to do, but you can't talk about, like, yeah, your keyword rankings are going to explode in the proposal, and then not show that. Or vice versa. You talk about, we're going to bring you traffic, and then you're just reporting keywords. You know, that doesn't align, and you're not going to have happy clients. It's not going to go well. So a tip I would have there would be, train your clients in the proposal about what you're going to be doing, the language you're going to be using. If they're on board with that, then they'll be a better client. Tip number 3 would kind of go back to knowing how much things cost. You know, if you do need to lower a cost, or a client asks, like, hey, can we do a discount here or there? You need to know what your profit margin actually is, because you could potentially cut your own throat and go into the hole on a client. So if you know what your profit margins are and how much you are actually making off of $1,000 client or a $500 client or whatever, how much is actually going in your pocket, then you know how much you could actually discount if you needed to. I don't necessarily recommend going for discounts, but obviously we've all done it at some point.
Yeah. And
You know,
regretted it every time, right?
every minute. But probably the biggest reason you regret is you realize like, oh, I'm not making any money off of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So know if it's even possible, in the first place. But I think you
Yeah.
do need to know what you're going to make per client. Like that will actually hit your pocket, and then you could know if your pricing is flexible. And I wouldn't recommend discounting anyway. But if you need to get creative to land the client, and if it's worthwhile, know what you can and can't do so that you're still profitable and still doing
Right.
well.
I guess the question I was asking, and I know there are multiple ways of getting clients, but I guess the question that I was asking in around 3 tips of what channels would you recommend? I know I talk a lot about networking, especially if you're niching down, going to conferences. You can run Facebook ads, you can do organic outreach, cold calling, sending letters in the mail. What three methods would you use to attract clients? I mean, what worked for you at the beginning? Did you have 3? Can you
So
think of 3, Kyle, that worked well for you when you first started?
yeah, getting out there. So people don't start off as an SEO personality, right? But you can meetings like meeting groups, networking groups. They are starving for speakers. They're starving for education. And if you come in and say, I'm not going to pitch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a training. And what you're doing in that training is you're telling people how you think about SEO, and you're explaining how to do a particular method. Uh, Getting that out there and then filming yourself and then putting it out, you can start to create a library of those things. That is a fantastic way to get clients. Now that's a long play because you don't put out a video and instantly get clients. Or you don't going to the little business group is probably, you could maybe walk out of there with a client or a pretty hot lead. But those types of activities bring very good, very good clients. If you can do that, I would recommend doing that as a strong pillar of your outreach method. The other thing that you would probably want to consider doing is showing that you can do SEO. Do case studies. I did this and it ranked, and then you put it on SEO Signals Lab and you put it on Reddit, and everybody picks it up, and it spreads out. And there are a lot of people that are not SEOs in those channels. They're looking for SEOs, or they're looking for fresh ideas, or they're looking for people that can prove that they know what they're talking about. So go and do some SEO. The rhinoplasty plano continues to make me money because people are really blown away by it that could be done. Now, people have to understand that wasn't the first time that I've done that. I knew that would work because I've done it before. So doing SEO and then proving that you can do SEO is massive. And then you can get that across channels. That goes into all your proposals. Hey, we did this and we did that. And you can show that you have actual proof behind what you're doing. That's a good way to get clients. A third thing, we have a lot of different funnels running across a lot of different channels. Most of it is tip related. Tips are great. Do a tip, put it on Facebook, and then target the group that you're interested in, for your particular niche. Lawyers make these 3 mistakes. Every lawyer's clicking on that. I guarantee it. Or one hot tip for med spas, or whatever you're getting into for your niche. If you do that type of advertising and it is a hot tip, you end up with a pretty good targeted list that you can then reach out to, or you'll get people that are pretty interested in what you're doing. Again, though, that's also demonstrating SEO knowledge and then getting it in front of people, whichever method you feel happy doing.
Just to recap on those 3 things that you mentioned, networking. I know when I first started, I picked up a few clients from BNI events, small gatherings,
exactly
40 people. At that point, though, I wasn't niching down, and I sort of picked up whatever came my way. But I think networking has tremendous power and leverage when you do decide to niche down, and you go and talk in front of 100 cosmetic surgeons or 100 electricians. And that's essentially what Jason Hennessy did. He gave a short talk in front of a bunch of lawyers, and that's how he sort of found his way, and it grew from there, which touches on the second point that you raised there, demonstrating. Jason didn't pitch. He just went and said, hey, this is what I did, and picked up clients that way. And the last one is interacting and spending time in places where you can provide help and guidance and advice. You know, I do a lot of that over at Whirlpool, where a lot of business owners hang out, you know, just answering questions. They're not SEOs, they're people that run real businesses that are looking for genuine help and advice.
Yeah, and they appreciate it when they realize that, you know, this person knows what they're talking about. Then they are you get people coming after you for business, you know, to be clients, which is a nice spot to be in for sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one one, you know, you don't just pull a lever and suddenly you've got clients. I think it's a matter of finding, you know, for me and everyone else I've spoken to, it's taken time. You've got to find your way. You'll get things right, you'll get things wrong, you'll make mistakes, but over time things slowly fall into place.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing about niching down that is a good thing is you start to speak the lingo. I wouldn't know the first term for an electrician, you know, for anything, but they would really appreciate it if the marketing person talking to them knew all those terms.
Yeah.
You know, that goes
absolutely.
a long way.
Yeah.
And then also you can hear the objection of, well, if you only service electricians, are we going to be competing against each other? And you can say, no, absolutely not. There's so much space here. We're completely fine. And also, wouldn't you prefer somebody that knows the game of electrician rather than somebody that, you know, is in the med spa space and has no idea anything about how your business works?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Kyle, we've done an hour, just over an hour, dude. I know you've probably got more important things to be doing than sitting here with me, but I really appreciate you jumping on, man. You know, I feel like I should have rolled out the carpet and started pouring champagne, but because you built such a reputation in the SEO space, you know, everything that you said today has really resonated with me. I think we're on the same page. I know there are certain things that you do that I'm not sure about.
Sure, that's fine.
And
that's
but again, man, really appreciate you spending the time to jump on. You're welcome anytime, man. I don't know what to tell the guys in the group about the discount on Internet Marketing Gold. Maybe we can organize something, but
I'll get you in touch with Vera and she'll get that set up for you.
But for anyone that wants to get in touch, how do they do that, man? How do they find you?
You can find me at internetmarketing.gold. I am there. Going through those channels, posting stuff, asking me questions there is the right way.
Yeah, and what's the software that you run? POP?
Pageoptimizer.pro. Yeah.
Okay, and what about Surfer? Is that one yours as well, or is that did you get out of that? Maybe I shouldn't ask that question.
I think no, the Surfer guys are super nice guys, and I wouldn't talk bad about their software as much as I could. No, I'm kidding.
All right, dude. So you're over you're at High Voltage.
High Voltage SEO is the name of the agency.
Page Optimizer Pro and Internet Marketing Gold, and maybe we can work something out there. But
I'm sure that we will.
Thanks again, Kyle. It's been a pleasure having you on, man. And I look forward, you know, as I said, anytime you'd like to jump on and have a chat, or maybe I can, you know, get punched in the face over at SEO Fight Club. I'll be down for that.
Oh, that'd be perfect. That would be perfect.
That'd be awesome.
No, and actually, anybody listening, we take guests. All we want to see is something you've done.
Right.
You know, you show something like, hey, I did this and this happened. That is usually enough, and we can get you on the show. And if you're looking like, hey, I would like to get myself out more, reach out to shows like ours, like yours. You know,
man. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
how you get your name out there. Is just be available, do something that you can talk about, and then
you're absolutely right. You don't need to be an SEO talking to another SEO. You could, you know, find a cosmetic surgeon podcast or an electrician podcast and jump on and do your thing. Yeah. It's about, you gotta kick over, you gotta kiss a few frogs and kick over some rocks to find what you're looking for. But thanks again, dude.
Yeah, sure.
I think we've got more lag here, so I'll sign off. Good chatting, Kyle. Enjoy the rest of your evening, man, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man. See ya. Bye.
Bye.